What up, brawlers? Welcome back to Throwin Hands, the best MMA podcast in the world. I'm Jacob Janoski. Alongside me is Daniel Woods. Daniel, how you doing?
Daniel, I just called you. Just tried to call you Daniel. That's the mind frame that I'm in. Jacob, I'm doing quite well, other than the fact that I'm completely scatterbrained at this moment. But there's fights to talk about, and it's a heavyweight main event, so there's always good times when that happens.
There are always good times. All right, so we're gonna go over one or two events in the prelims. We have some Throwin Hands magic potentially here. Nate Landwehr versus Julian Rosa. Nate Landwehr coming off a good win a couple of months ago, and then against. Oh no, he didn't fight. I forgot about that. But I forgot that fight got canceled. But then Julian Rosa coming off a Darce choke win and his comeback in the UFC. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Daniel?
An entertaining fight coming up. I like Nate Landwehr. I think he's extremely talented, but we had a really good conversation with Julian Rosa, and like you said, he was in the midst of that comeback with a couple of he had a couple submission wins in 2020, had that bounce back into the UFC. Like you said, Darce choke over Sean Woodson. I'm really excited to see him get back out there. He's won 2 in a row now, both by submission, which is not something that he had really done in a little while. He hadn't submitted somebody in going on 3 years when he won in that fight at Cage Sport back in February, and then bounced back into the UFC on short notice and tapped out Sean Woodson, got a performance of the night, and he's going to be sticking around. So I like Rosa in this one. I think he's kind of figured out exactly what it means for him in the UFC after that 3-fight losing streak, got a little bit humbled, went back to his roots, picked up a victory there after a pretty long layoff, and then got back into the UFC. I think he's in a legitimate position to start moving back up because, to be completely honest, before that 3-fight losing streak, we hadn't seen all that much out of him because he had come off the Contender Series, never won a fight in the UFC, and got cut. So I think he's a guy, after talking to him, that values this second chance, and I think he's going to make the most of it.
Definitely. All right, 2 predictions in this one. I'm going to take Julian Rosa by decision. He's just a lot bigger than Landwehr, and I think he gets the job done. What about you, my man?
I'm on the same page as you with that. Landwehr, I agree. I think is a talented guy, and he's a very good fighter, to be completely honest. But I think Julian Rosa's legit right now as far as somebody that's going to stay in the UFC roster, and I think he's going to pick up the win.
All righty. The main card, first bout of the main card. The man, the myth, the legend that is Andrei Arlovski versus, I think, one of the brightest heavyweight prospects coming up in Tom Aspinall. These guys are going to be really slugging it out, and this fight's not coming out of the first round. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm a big fan of both of these guys. Arlovski is, of course, everything that you expect him to be. Former UFC heavyweight champion, is still fighting an extremely high level. He's got 49 decisions on his professional record at 30-19. So I think Arlovski is obviously a huge test for Tom Aspinall. Again, it's not been exactly smooth sailing of recent for Andrei Arlovski, but when you're as old as he is, he's 42. That's kind of what happens. But still, he's on a 2-fight win streak. That's the thing. He's a massive underdog in this fight, at least according to Vegas, against Tom Aspinall, and he's still on a 2-fight win streak. He hasn't lost since he got knocked out by Jairzinho Rozenstruik back in 2019. He was 2-0 in 2020, and I think he's going to come out firing for an opportunity in 2021 to prove that he's at least still a top 15 guy. But you move on to Tom Aspinall, came up through Cage Warriors, that's produced so many of the best European fighters in the UFC. He's 2-0 in the UFC, and neither one of those fights have gotten out of the first 2 minutes. I think we're in for a very, very exciting fight, even though I don't think it's going to last very long.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think it's just going to be, whatever you said the other night on the podcast that made somebody question what we were doing.
Shoot. Well, that term's going to get brought up at the main event. Don't worry. I'll throw it out now. I'll throw it out now. Heavyweight division of the UFC. big meaty men slapping meat. That's exactly what it is, man. That's what 90% of the UFC heavyweight division is right now. Just because it's massive dudes who are beating the crap out of each other. That's what you get with guys that big. And to be completely honest, it's a pretty fitting statement. You know, it has nothing to do with anything other than the way that these guys fight. It's just big dudes that are strong and have massive frames going at each other with a bunch of power. And that's the way it goes in the UFC heavyweight division right now.
Yeah. Shout out to JIT8976 for giving us that 2-star review after saying that statement. I told everybody to give a 5-star review on Twitter the other day. We ended up getting a couple more 1 stars.
Oh, well.
Oh, we're doing all right. We're doing all right. All right. To the next event of the evening, Phil Hawes versus Imavov. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that first name. That'd be a disservice to this guy. But this will be a banger. You got Imavov, more of a grappler, and Philip Hawes, who Julian Marquez, our main man, knocked out in order to get into the UFC. So this is an interesting mix of styles. If Imavov takes us to the ground, I think he wins. If Hawes stands up, I think he wins. But this will be interesting to watch. What do you have to say about this one?
Yeah, I think this is a classic case where you've got a couple guys coming up that you're trying to figure out necessarily what you have in them. And you pit guys with different styles against each other to see how they adjust to those kind of situations. Like you said, it was Philip Hawes that got knocked out by Julian Marquez on his opportunity to really break through. Hawes ended up bouncing back on the Contender Series a couple years later in 2020, back in September, and picked up a first-round knockout, and then fought just over a month later and knocked out Jakob Malkoun in 18 seconds. So Hawes is a guy that has really kind of turned things on its head ever since that Contender Series loss. That was only his, I believe, his 5th fight as a professional. And it was his 2nd loss in a row and his 3rd in 4 fights, including a fight on the Ultimate Fighter. So you look at Philip Hawes, and it looks like that Julian Marquez loss really turned some things around for him, because he's won 5 in a row, including a doctor stoppage win in his Bellator debut. He gets that opportunity on the Contender Series, makes the most of it, and then hammers one out in his UFC debut as well. He's looked great, and I have to give him credit for that. Meanwhile, you've got Imavov across the way, and he's another guy on a long fight win streak. He made his UFC debut around the same time that Hawes did back in October, and won by a unanimous decision, and had won 4 of his last 5 fights, including some really impressive submissions there. So, like you said, different styles, both young guys looking for an opportunity, both in their 2nd fight in the UFC. I think they both have a chance to have really bright futures, but I think one of them is going to have an opportunity to really make some noise quickly if they pull this one out.
Yeah, I'm not even going to add anything to what you said. Oh, and shout out Philip Hawes out of Stanford MMA. Shout out Greg Jones real quick.
Yeah.
So predictions, I'm going to take Hawes by knockout here. I think he's a man on a mission with this win streak that he's got going on, and I don't see that changing. What about you?
I'm with you on that as well. Hawes with a KO.
All right, to more big meaty men slapping meat. Alexei Olynyk versus Chris Daukaus. Chris Daukaus, some of the fastest hands in this division. He's a lot of fun to watch. And Alexei Olynyk, this will be his 75th professional MMA fight.
That's
59
disgusting.
wins. I think he has about I think he has about 50 submissions, and he's 44. 46 submissions. He's 44, I believe, and he wants to fight for 7 or 8 more years. He says, "This guy's insane." What are your thoughts on this matchup? Because this is, if Chris Daukaus goes to the ground, he might as well just tap before he gets choked out.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big opportunity for Chris Daukaus, who is fighting a guy, believe it or not, that's 12 years older than him. I mean, you look at what he's done so far, and he's not done a whole lot in the UFC, but he's still 2-0 in that time, and he's beaten some young guys with some talent. He's beaten Parker Porter as well as Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira, who are both very talented young guys. So you look at Chris Daukaus, and he's 10-3 as a pro. He's a really well-built guy. You know, the last time he weighed in, he came in at 6'2", 262 pounds, which I think is really good for a heavyweight, particularly with how quick his hands are. He causes a lot of issues for people because he packs such a quick punch that does have a little bit of oomph behind it. And then you look across at Alexei Olynyk, and there's not a whole lot to say about him. You look at even his accolades outside of mixed martial arts, the things that he's been through that make him as good as he is. He's an international master of sport in combat sambo. He's a 4th degree black belt in jiu-jitsu, a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. This guy does absolutely everything you want on the ground. And if he sticks you with a hand, you're still going to be in big trouble. You're talking about a guy at 44 that stands in 6'2", 235 pounds, and is still going at this kind of rate. And at one point in his career was fighting as a middleweight. So there's not much Alexei Olynyk hasn't done. It's going to be a huge test for Chris Daukaus, especially this early, but he's the favorite in this fight. And if he can pull it out, I think it makes him a legitimate prospect to break into the top 10 very soon.
Yeah, I have to agree with what you said there with Chris Daukaus. I mean, this is a huge step up for him. He's fairly new to the UFC, and he's already fighting the number 10th ranked guy. So Dana White and the matchmakers must see something really special in him, and I do too. His hands are phenomenal. And so on to predictions, I'm going to take the Ukrainian expat Alexei Olynyk to win this fight. I think this is too big of a step for Daukaus. Could Daukaus make some noise in this division? Absolutely. I have no question. I bet you he could be a top 5 guy one day. But I think Alexei Olynyk takes us by submission. What do you have to say?
I came in thinking this was Olynyk, and I don't like betting against him. But to be completely honest, I talked myself into Chris Daukaus, so I'm going to take him in this one.
Did you know that Alexei Olynyk fought Chael Sonnen back in 2006?
I'm not surprised. Like,
Fun fact.
That's amazing. That's great.
The undefeated Chael P. Sonnen.
There you go.
Never lost a round.
That's wonderful.
All right. A nice grappling matchup here. Charles Rosa versus Derrick Minner. Charles Rosa is as good as it gets when it comes to grappling. Very, very highly skilled jiu-jitsu guy. And Derrick Minner, he's kind of just everywhere. He tries to do a little too much at sometimes. That's why I've noticed when I watch him, but he's a lot of fun to watch. I'll tell you that. Really fun matchup here. What do you have to say about this one?
I think this is going to be a really interesting fight because Charles Rosa didn't actually have a really good start to his UFC career. He had a really good start as a pro. He started out his career 9-0, bouncing back and forth between 3 divisions. Then he comes to the UFC and lost his first fight and has alternated wins and losses his entire time. He's fought some really talented guys. His last 3, I should say, are to Yair Rodriguez, Shane Burgos, and Bryce Mitchell. There's nothing to complain about there, but he just hasn't gotten really that marquee win yet to this point. And then on the opposite side, you've got a guy in Derrick Minner who is more new to the UFC and has followed a similar path to Charles Rosa, at least to start, where he lost his first fight in the UFC on ESPN Plus 27 back in February, but then pulled out an impressive first round submission win against TJ Laramie with a guillotine choke back in September. These are 2 guys that bring interesting things to the table. Rosa obviously gets the majority of his work done on the ground, and that's where Minner thrives as well. His last, let me count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 wins as a professional fighter have been by submission, going back all the way to 2015. So if this fight goes to the ground, it might be the most entertaining of the night.
Yeah, definitely. This is, if you like grappling, I know some people really don't just want to see big guys or anybody just throwing hands, but if you like grappling, I mean, this is your matchup. All right, predictions. I'm taking.
I just want to say one thing before we move on to that. But before we move on to prediction, I would like to point out that Derek Minner's last fight before he came to the UFC um, is the wonderfully named Dynasty Combat Sports 57 Seasons Beatings 2019 from December of 2019. And that's a fight card that it appears started. Oh, okay, never mind. Never mind. But 15 fights on that card. Derek Minner winning the main event and holding on to his Dynasty Combat Sports featherweight championship.
I was looking at Derek Minner's like record and such. He's fought for some interesting interesting promotions. There's one I forget what it was called. I gotta look this up now. I'm gonna really kill
I mean, he's
myself.
been all over the place. I mean, he's fought for LFA for several years. He fought for Victory FC. He was in there with Dynasty Combat Sports. It's Seasons Beatings. He's been all over the place. Oh, here we go. April of 2013. Disorderly Conduct 18. Spring Brawl. Man,
Oh.
we need to just do an episode or something looking at like just these regional promotions and just get into them.
I'd be down. Let's figure that out. He also had one. He also fought for Hard Knocks, but the logo is some knuckles as the O. So I thought it was Hard Knucks. I'm like, oh, that's creative. I'm like,
Close enough.
missed opportunity there. All right, predictions.
Close enough.
I'm taking Rosa by decision. What do you have to say?
I'm going to take Rosa by decision as well. I think matched up with Minner, he may try to keep it on the feet a little bit more than he would normally, and I think that lends to a decision finish.
All right, to the co-main event of the evening: Katlyn Vera versus Yana Kunitskaya. Yana Kunitskaya, her last fight might have been the most boring fight I've ever seen, but she got the job done. And Katlyn Vera, she's a killer, man. I think she could make some noise in this bantamweight division, but if Yana Kunitskaya just gets a hold of her and grinds it out, there's no way Vejeda is going to win this. What do you have to say about this matchup? This could be interesting if Vejeda gets the momentum her way, but if Kunitskaya gets the momentum her way, it's going to be a boring one.
It's so hard to get away from Yana Kunitskaya. It really is, and I think that's going to be a big problem for Katlyn Vejeda in this one. These are two fighters that you don't really hear about all that much as big time contenders, but they're both really experienced actually. With Vejeda being on the UFC roster going back to 2016, and Kunitskaya really being one of the very first women in this division coming into the UFC and making her debut fighting Chris Cyborg for the featherweight title. Of course, she got knocked out in the first round of that fight, but these are two fighters that have kind of helped build the women's bantamweight division, I guess you would say at this point, as Kunitskaya has been back and forth. But I think it's really interesting to see them square off now as they've sort of started to fall back a little bit more in their careers. Not necessarily Vejeda in that regard, because she's only got one loss to a professional record. She's 11-1. She just hasn't fought all that often, having only fought, I believe, 6 times since coming into the UFC in 2016. So you look at these two, and it's really kind of a diverse mix of styles, because Kunitskaya is just going to try to grind this one out. Whereas you've got Katlyn Vejeda, who's so good on the ground with her Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think this is an interesting matchup, and I think if anybody's going to combat what Kunitskaya does so well, I think Katlyn Vejeda might have a really good chance.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything you said there. So I guess we'll go to predictions. This is a tough one for me. I think the head is so good, but Kunitskaya fights out of Jackson Winklejaw on MMA. She trains with Holly Holm and all. She trains with just some killers, and Vejeda I'm sure does too. I don't remember. I can't think of what team she works with. I gotta look that up real quick. But I think, yeah, she works with somebody in Brazil, but I'm going to take Vejeda in this one. I'm just going to go out on a limb. I think she has phenomenal grappling, black belts in jiu-jitsu and judo. She's great. I think she has a chance to become a champion if she does well today, tomorrow rather. But what are your predictions?
I like Vieta as well. I think she's got a great chance to kind of make her stamp in this fight and make herself a legitimate top 5.
All righty. To the main event of the evening. Dan, you want to do the honors with the quote? Because we know what this is.
There's big meaty men slapping meat, my friend.
Yes.
You got Curtis Blaydes going up against Derrick Lewis. I mean, what else could you want?
What else could you want? Curtis Blaydes coming off a win against Alexander Volkov, and Derrick Lewis coming off a win against Alexei Olynyk, almost getting Scarful choked out of there. And then,
oh, buddy.
And then Curtis Blaydes basically wrestling his way to a win. Both of these guys have wins against Alexander Volkov. Derrick Lewis coming back from the Shadow Realm to do so back in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. What's your thoughts on this matchup?
I mean, this is either going to be the most entertaining fight of the night, or it's going to absolutely suck. There's no way this is going to go any other direction, because either Curtis Blaydes is just going to take Derrick Lewis down and grind him into a fine powder, or these guys are just going to swap hands for 3 minutes and somebody's going to get knocked out. I don't find it there to be much consideration for it going another direction. So you look at these two guys, and really they can both wrestle and they can both stand and bang. So I think this is going to be a really entertaining fight. Obviously, Lewis, with the power in his hands, I think is going to have an advantage on the feet, and obviously Blaydes is going to have an advantage on the ground as a junior college national champion wrestler who, like I said, has made his hay in the UFC, just taking guys down and absolutely just destroying them and grinding them into the mat for 3 rounds, 5 rounds, however long the fight is. And it's an interesting matchup. It's one we haven't seen before. It's one I've wanted to see for a little while, and I think it's going to help decide some things at the top of the heavyweight division. Obviously, with John Jones coming in, these guys have got skipped in line pretty much, and I think they're both going to be determined to prove that whenever that John Jones fight happens, I should say, that they're the next ones in line.
Yeah, I have to agree with you there. I think with this fight could go either way. If this goes to the ground, Blaydes is going to win it, but I think Blaydes has to end it early because if this goes in the 5th round, Derrick Lewis is going to come back from the Shadow Realm and win this. There's no doubt in my mind because he always looks like he's going to lose, and when you think he's going to lose, he wins. So that's my take on it. What are your sort of keys for this one, you think?
I'm on the same page. I think Blaydes needs to probably take care of this early, because when you get a desperate Derrick Lewis, you find yourself in a very dangerous position.
All right, predictions. Here's how I see the fight going. 4th round, Curtis Blaydes ends the round on top, and then back into the 5th round, it's the same way. But Derrick Lewis is going to find some way to get up. He's just going to blast Curtis Blaydes in the jaw 2.5 minutes into the 5th round. I got Derrick Lewis by knockout. What do you have to say?
Curtis Blaydes, 2nd round TKO.
It could really go either way.
Yeah, it could. I'm just going to be completely honest. That's the way I see this fight going, because I think we're seeing a Curtis Blaydes that legitimately thinks he can be the UFC heavyweight champion, and I think we're going to see that opportunity for him very soon.
I listened to his interview with Helwani, and Curtis Blaydes doesn't like Derrick Lewis's humor. What kind of maniac are you to not appreciate the humor of Derrick Lewis? It's really shameful. He said that Derrick Lewis takes the low-hanging fruit. I'm like, well, it's just his delivery. I think his delivery is hilarious. Not what he says necessarily. His delivery.
It's completely deadpan.
My balls was hot. Fight news. Belal Muhammad to fight Leon Edwards on March 13th. I cannot wait for this fight. This is going to be
great.
Awesome. I mean, I'm just curious about what's going to happen to Leon Edwards, because he hasn't fought in so long. It's going to be tough for him. I mean, he's 29. I mean, it helps when you're young for sure, but Belal Muhammad, he's ranked 13th. His cardio is off the charts. So I'm interested to see what are your thoughts on this one, man?
This is really interesting because you've got Muhammad stepping in, and he looked great against Diego Lima. He's won 4 straight, and he's looked good the entire way. And I think it'll be really interesting for that matchup to come down, because it is a really big step up for Belal Muhammad, because Leon Edwards is a legitimate title contender at 29. Like you said, he's still got the majority of his prime in front of him, and he was really angling for a title shot before the world shut down, and he's not fought since July of 2019. But he's extremely talented, and you look back through his history, and the only guy that he has lost to in the UFC, other than Claudio Silva in his debut, is Kamaru Usman. And I think that's an opportunity that he's really going to want to avenge that loss and be the man that takes the belt away from him. So I think Leon Edwards with a win here, as long as Usman settles his score with Jorge Masvidal in the next title fight and wins that one, I think Leon Edwards is legitimately the next contender for the UFC welterweight title if he pulls out a win against Belal Muhammad. Meanwhile, if Belal Muhammad beats Leon Edwards, then that's a huge step up in competition for him, and he solidifies himself probably top 8 in that division, maybe even higher.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation for Muhammad, because he moves up anyway after that fight if he shows something good. But when Leon Edwards, he's in a tough position. Like he didn't have to take this fight, to be honest, but he wants to fight, and if he wins, I would expect him to get the next title shot, unless they decide, hey, Colby Covington's the money fight, which I wouldn't blame them, to be honest. I want to see Colby Covington fight Usman again. Who doesn't want to see that? It was one of the best fights of 2019, but anyway, it's exciting. The welterweight division is a mess. I mean, Colby Covington claims that he and Masvidal were offered 7 figures to coach Tough, and Masvidal said no. But what can you say?
Did you see his comments about moving up the middleweight potentially?
Who, Covington?
You were talking about Colby Covington. I was talking about Usman. Never mind.
Yeah,
move on.
If Adesanya decides to leave the division,
if he would permanently go to 205, he would consider moving to 185.
Speaking of 205, Adesanya goes in about 200 pounds on fight night, and Jan Blachowicz is probably about 230. That's going to be interesting to watch. And
that's a big change.
And I think everybody's looking over Jan. I would be terrified to fight him. He's a champion for a reason. And Polish power, baby. Polish power. Yeah. I'm all in on the Polish power. I don't know if you're in on the Polish power, but I am.
I am. I'm a big Blachowicz fan, and I'm a big Adesanya fan too, though. So that's going to be a tough fight for me to decide a pick on when we get there. This is something I wanted to run by you, because we talked about this off the air after Usman was so dominant against Burns. But this is a direct quote from what he said in the same interview that I was talking about, where he talked about moving up to 185 if Adesanya sticks at 205. He said, "I've stated it over and over and over before. I'd rather there be 2 Africans with belts as opposed to 1 African with 2 belts. And after March, there's going to be 3 Africans with 4 belts. So it's a good time to be an African. Good time." And I think that's something that has really flown under the radar in recent years, is how much of an emerging market and emerging trend there is in the UFC of so many African fighters having a lot of success. You've got Kamaru Usman, obviously. Israel Adesanya is the other guy he talks about, and then you've got Francis Ngannou fighting for the UFC heavyweight title again. I wanted to just run that by you, because we've seen so many different things with the UFC over the years. Obviously it was the Brazilians with the Brazilian jiu-jitsu style and the Gracies when things first started out with the UFC. And then you've seen Japanese fighters, Chinese fighters, Russian fighters. And now it looks like the African MMA development, I guess you could say, is really starting to rise in the UFC. With Usman and Ngannou and Adesanya potentially holding 4 title belts by the end of March. I think that's something that we haven't really talked about and hasn't really been talked about in the media.
Yeah, we do have to talk about this. And then, if you go up to the featherweight division, you got Sadiq Yusuf sitting there at number 10, a bright young prospect in that division. And I think he has the potential to become a very nice contender. And Now, do I think there will be 4 belts in Africa? Unfortunately, I do not. I think it'll stay 2. But I hope they prove me wrong. I think that'd be awesome for Africa. All those kids over there need some role models, and if they see people like Usman, Adesanya, and especially Francis Ngannou, like that's motivation right there. But will there be 4? I don't think so. But these guys are really making some headway over there, and I think, like you said, it doesn't get talked about enough. There are lots of African prospects that have been coming up as of late, and it's entertaining to watch.
Again, none of those guys were necessarily trained in Africa. They were all born there. Adesanya moving to New Zealand, Usman moving to the United States, both when they were kids. But still, like you said, I think the ability to have that kind of role model for kids is something that I think is really important as the UFC tries to make this more of an international brand, because for the longest time it was just like the United States and Brazil were the only places that cared about MMA, and I don't think that's the truth anymore. It really is becoming more of a worldwide sport, and Africa is really one of the last frontiers for that, I guess you could say, because we've seen it become popular all over Asia, all over Europe as well, and moving into Russia. And now with Volkanovski and Adesanya as champions, you've got it in Oceania, New Zealand, and Australia. So if it can expand even further than it already has in Africa, I think you can really start talking about the UFC or MMA in general, I should say, as a global sport that you can find anywhere you go.
I think it already is a global sport. I mean, over the past few years, there is currently only one American champion, and it's Stipe Miocic.
That's true.
And you have a Brazilian. You have a Shevchenko's from Kazakhstan, right? I think so.
Yes, I believe.
And you have Zhang Weili from China, Adesanya and Usman from Nigeria, Blachowicz from Poland, Khabib from Russia, Volkanovski from New Zealand, Jan from Russia, Figueiredo from Brazil. And it's like, and if you look at these guys, I think there's only
Shevchenko's from Kyrgyzstan. Sorry,
Kyrgyzstan. Okay. And then there's 4 Americans in the men's pound for pound. So, Americans don't necessarily dominate the sport whatsoever. There's more New Zealand champions than there are American champions right now. And there's more Russian champions and Brazilian champions than there are American champions. I think it's phenomenal that, you have all this reach, this impeccable reach, and, Blachowicz for Eastern Europe and everything. So I think it's already global. And I don't know.
There are, I don't think, sports other than MMA and soccer, other than like track and field, that you could say is played or people compete in on every continent other than Antarctica.
Yeah, maybe boxing.
Yeah,
but you don't see boxers coming out of Asia very often.
Right.
The only Australian boxer I can think of was the guy who somehow defeated Pacquiao in that one fight in Australia to win the title belt a few years ago. You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
But and then I know boxing's huge in Europe. You have Tyson Fury over there. The Gypsy King. But yeah, it's.
But you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
There are very few global sports that you can say are done everywhere, and MMA has become one of them, I would say, in the last 10 years.
Yeah, especially now. It's not rec sports everywhere. You know what I mean? But Everybody from everywhere can do this. It doesn't take much. Just got to find some people who want to fight. That's really what you get, and it's and there's different martial arts at different places, and it's not just a uniform sport. It's diversity is incredible, and one of the best bantamweights in the world is from Georgia, the country of Georgia. Come on, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. I can't remember what it was. Bellator's coming out with rankings now. Heyo.
We got new developments.
Yes, we do. I don't know when they're gonna. it's just a whole bunch of MMA junkie guys doing the rankings. South China Morning Post. Oh, that's Hong Kong. That's all right. MMA Report. Yeah, you have some interesting people doing this. But I mean, I'm not. We talked about this last week, but I can't wait for this Grand Prix in Bellator. This is going to be incredible. I can't wait. I cannot wait.
And before we really finish up here, I do think it was something I wanted to mention earlier that I just kind of glossed over. I think it is worth mentioning that Derrick Lewis is everything going on in the state of Texas right now with winter weather causing so many problems there, cold snaps, freezing temperatures, knocking out electricity all over the state. His family, obviously, from Houston, he's saying that I should say that they've not dealt with a ton of issues as his family, but he's fully aware of everything going on in his home state. And I think with his city being out of power for a good bit of this week, and there really being a crisis across his home state, I think that's another level of motivation that I think you've got to look at here. Derrick Lewis, we've seen in the past, as a guy that thrives off that kind of motivation. So maybe I undersold his ability to come out against Curtis Blaydes in this fight, but he's certainly a guy that's going to have a lot of motivation behind himself coming in.
Yeah, definitely. I can't agree with you more. One more thing. Ion Kudalaba versus Devin Clark added to May 1st UFC event. This is going to be a banger. I cannot wait. May 1st is going to be a night for light heavyweights. You got Prochaska versus Reyes, the spelling bee champ. It's going to be something else May 1st. All right, you got anything else?
Sir, I do not. Sorry.
All right. Nor do I. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, we'll see y'all later.